You spy gravitational lensing? Indeed you do. Indeed you do spy gravitational lensing. Oh, I need to go set up the live stream on YouTube really quick. Just getting set up. All right, we're set up there. Gonna pop out the chat really quick. All right, and we're back. We're back on YouTube as well. So make sure to go watch on Let's Rope Another Flat Earther. I love listening to them. We don't have enough time to try to find a flat earther. Flat earthers are hard to come by these days because they're all gone. Yeah, so welcome YouTube, welcome people from YouTube, welcome people from TikTok. Hope you guys have been enjoying the live stream. I don't know why. We have a lot of viewers today, but just not a lot of guests. We've been short on the guests today, and I don't understand that at all. Almost extinct flurfs. Yes, they fell off the edge. Absolutely. They fell off the edge. Anyway, just let people trickle in on YouTube. Let people trickle in on TikTok. See that the topic is different. All right, we have a guest. Oh, nope, they disconnected. Science is responsible for pollution, which equals cancer and other diseases. Is that true? Is science responsible for pollution, or is it like industry that's responsible for pollution? Josh, how's it going? Josh? Can you hear me? I can't hear you right now. Josh? Try again. I don't know why, but I can't hear you. You're muted. You must be muted somehow. All right, let's bring up another guest. Elim. Oh, Josh came back. Rip. Josh, get your audio sorted and I'll bring you up next. Eli M, I should say. All right, Eli's not connecting. Let's talk to Josh again.
Hello.
Josh, welcome back. I can hear you finally.
How are you doing? You all right, mate?
One more time?
Understand me, I'm British.
Oh, Jesus. I can understand you now. Just took a second to process. Yeah, okay. So do you believe in God?
I do, mate, yeah.
Okay, and which one?
Christianity.
Okay, great. What would you say is the most compelling thing that you could tell me? That would be, you know, convincing, like a convincing argument, if you will.
Well, I suppose the biggest question, it's more of a question to you. What exactly do you think made this world then?
Well, I mean, the way I see it is the world formed via natural processes. Like gravity is what caused the Earth to form, right?
Right.
So, and I figure like basically everything that we've ever seen forms via a natural process.
Right, but where did these things originate from? I mean, something has to have originated in the first place for that to exist.
Why? Why couldn't it have just, you know, always been there?
Because that doesn't work within the law of the universe. It's not possible. And if
Why
it was
not?
possible, then it would have to come under some sort of law out of our not even fathomable.
Why would it have to? Like, what law are you referring to?
I don't understand how anything could just have always existed. It doesn't make sense to me. But I mean, God has always existed, and it's.
But that does make sense to you. So you don't have an issue with things always existing.
No, it doesn't make sense to me. But that's the whole point. It's so beyond human comprehension that it must be of something better.
the universe is beyond human comprehension?
No, the idea of something that have always existed. Like if you try and imagine,
that's pretty comprehensible. I don't see an issue.
So do you? I don't know what to put across the point there. It's if you try to think. So let's say, for example, you think of a racetrack right now, right? You sort of picture in your head the beginning and the end, yeah. Well, so you can visually and thoughtfully think of the start and the finish.
Yep.
So everything must have a start and a finish by.
But why does everything have to have a start and finish? I could also imagine just a road that goes on forever.
But you couldn't know because
I just did. I just imagined it.
No, you imagined the idea of a road that goes on forever.
Just like how I imagined the idea of a racetrack that has a beginning and an end.
But it's not the same thing. Like what I'm saying, picture. Try and picture for a second. So, for example, when you picture an apple, you will physically, in your head, picture the shape of an apple.
Okay, so I'm now imagining infinity. I'm picturing infinity. Yeah. I'm picturing an infinite racetrack, okay?
Right.
But so I'm doing it.
Can you visually picture that?
Yeah, I just did. Goes on forever in both directions.
Yeah, but you can't know because that's impossible.
But I just did it. It's
impossible to visualize. You're visualizing the idea.
No, I'm visualizing a racetrack that goes on in both directions forever.
Yeah, you can visualize that from a certain point on the track, but you can never visualize the whole thing. The whole thing.
But I can't visualize a finite racetrack either. I'm just visualizing a racetrack that is like centered somewhere. Like from a point of perspective.
You could visualize a finite racetrack.
So you're right. You're right. You can't see the entirety. I mean, okay, actually, in a sense, you can if you have good enough eyes. But like, if it goes on forever in one direction, it'll just get smaller and smaller in that direction. If it doesn't go on forever, then it'll stop at some point. But I'm not visualizing it ever stopping. I'm visualizing it goes on and on forever, so it just comes to a point. I don't like. It just doesn't seem like it's a compelling argument if you say, well, you can't see an entirely infinite racetrack all at once. Like, okay, yeah. But how does that mean it's impossible?
A very good analogy, but I mean, well, usually when you say that type of argument, I don't understand how you can say why. Wouldn't it be like that? There must have been an originating form of something. There has to have been. That's just what it has to have been. There has to have been an originating form. I don't see how you can say. You can say why. It's all good saying why, but it's not physically possible for the to have not been an originating form.
I don't think that's true. Unless you can give me a good reason to think that it's not physically possible. I just don't agree with you. I just don't think that that's true, that it's not physically possible.
Well, that's like under the same breath saying, give me a reason why it is possible.
Well, look, the way I see it is that unless you can come up with a reason why something is actually physically impossible, then that means that it's possible, right? At least you have reason to think that it's possible. For example, if I told you that it is impossible for the Earth to, all on its own, suddenly start orbiting the sun in the other direction, I could give you a reason why that's impossible. I could appeal to laws of physics, for example. But can you give me a reason why it's impossible for something to not have a beginning?
I'm gonna have to go, bro. I'm getting spam called by someone.
Okay, that's fine. You're good. Thanks for being here. Yeah, I figured that he was having an issue. Oh, come on. There we go. All right, let's bring on another guest. Hood humor. Oh. Hood humor, how's it going?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Do you believe in God?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Which one?
Well, I don't believe in like any contemporary religions like Christianity or Islam. I just feel like someone had to create the universe, you know.
Okay. Why should I believe that?
Well, like, don't we say the universe is like some amount of years old?
That's usually regarded as the amount of time since the hot Big Bang. That was about 13.8
So,
billion years ago. But that doesn't say that that was the beginning, right?
so it's not the beginning. So like, what was before then? Like, we
It
don't
depends
really
on
know. So,
depends on
like,
who you ask. If you ask cosmologists, they will tell you inflation was, or if you ask many cosmologists, they will tell you inflation was before that. If you ask some cosmologists, they'll tell you it wasn't inflation, but we don't know what it was. It just depends on who you ask. We don't know with certainty anyway.
Right, but like, so is it like unreasonable to believe like there must have been something, you know, like if we follow the chain of creation, you could say like that there's like a god, that's some like entity that created everything, where like this chain stops, you know?
I think that generally, in order for something to be reasonable, you need a reason to believe it's true. And I don't know if there's a reason to believe that's true.
I mean, just like following logic, like something must have created.
But that's not that's not what happens if you follow logic. You don't come to that conclusion. You come to the conclusion that we don't know whether or not the universe had a beginning.
We don't know that the universe had a beginning.
Mm-hmm.
That's the accepted scientific consensus, or what?
Well, the point is that there isn't scientific consensus on the matter. There's not widespread agreement.
Okay, then. I don't know what to say.
Okay. Thanks for being here, Hood Humor. I appreciate you.
Okay.
Let me hydrate really quick. Take meds, you are tired? I'm not tired. I will need coffee eventually though, but not for another half hour or so. But we're not getting any guests, and I don't know why, so maybe we just end the live here. Anybody have any objection to that? End the live here, I'll go get some coffee. No, wait a half hour, it's my lunch break. No, don't end. Well, but nobody's here. There's nobody in the guest box. Oh, I guess Debater's here. Debater, welcome back.
Hello, sir.
Why did you lie that you were Mexican?
I'm sorry. I'm an Indian immigrant in the United States. I apologize to you. I wanted to hide. And I really apologize, Dr. Blitz.
It's okay. I forgive you.
I'm
Now, do you believe in
I'm
God?
really sorry. No, sir, I don't. I'm an atheist.
Okay,
But-
you just want. Oh, that's right.
but,
That's right. You just wanted to apologize. That's fair. Well, I appreciate you coming
Yeah.
up and being honest. Thanks for being here, man.
Yes, sir.
Hey, well, kudos to him. Okay. Kudos to him for, you know, being honest. We have a guest on YouTube. Mo, how's it going? Mo, can you hear me? Mo? All right, Mo's not here. Oh, we have a few guests on TikTok too, so we don't have to end the live yet. Brad meets World. Yeah, we just have to conjure Will again. Brad, how's it going?
Hey Blitz, how are you, man?
I'm doing all right. Do you believe in God?
I do.
Okay, and which one? Just so I can, you know, see where you are.
Yeah, just the God, like a God.
Would you say that like?
And my reason,
Are you Christian or like
no,
just like kind of like a generic theist?
yeah. Because the reason being is that if God didn't exist, like how would this be possible?
What? How would what be
Some say
possible?
love,
Damn it, Brad.
it is a river. No, I don't believe in God, brother. I love you, dude. Keep
All
doing
right,
what
take care,
you're
bud. Generic nondescript God is the only God that has evidence for it. It's true.
Yo,
Hey, John, how's it going?
good man. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Do you believe in God?
I do, yeah.
And which one, just so I can be clear on what we're talking about?
I wouldn't. I don't think I would say I believe in one specific one. I'd probably like say I'm somewhat more in the realm of like a universalist or Unitarian, maybe.
Okay, cool. And what would you say is like the most convincing argument you could give me that, you know, might convince me?
Well, I don't know. I don't really know if I'm someone who would want to like, convince you. I honestly wanted to hop up and kind of talk about like the dynamics of belief, I guess, in some sense, and ask you a little bit just about kind of like the idea that like doesn't it feel like having a materialist or and I'm not exactly sure what worldview you would say you ascribe to, but do you feel ever like having a materialist worldview and would necessitate some form of belief or faith on certain theories that haven't been proven yet? Do you think that having a materialist worldview requires some faculty of faith or belief?
I guess it depends on the materialist worldview. I think generally, if your worldview is, I think, okay, so the correct statement is something like, every worldview is going to have some foundational view, foundational belief, and I think it's generally pretty hard to actually come up with, well, okay, that's actually not true. Many worldviews will have a foundational belief that is undemonstrated. Maybe you believe that the external world exists. You can't prove it, you just believe it. And then from there, you derive all of your other beliefs. Some people will also say that, oh, well, you don't need a foundational belief as long as you have a coherent belief. So as long as all of your beliefs kind of like mesh together like a web, then that's fine. And that is what justification is. I think if you consider belief to be that which you don't have evidence for, or sorry, if you think faith is beliefs for which there is not evidence, then I don't think that a materialist necessarily relies on faith really at all, depending on the materialist, of course. If you have some other meaning of faith, then I don't know, maybe we could talk about that. But yeah, I don't think so, not generally.
I mean, I guess the reason why it comes up in my mind is like the idea of dark matter. And so this is probably a subject, and definitely a subject that you know a lot more about than I do. But I guess like doing some research on it from my perspective, I'm left with a lot of questions about like the idea that it seems like, to have a coherent or rational, view that is deterministic or that posits that, physical reality is absolute reality. You have to accept, or at least include some aspect of faith or belief without evidence in the form of believing in dark matter.
You don't have to believe in dark matter to be a materialist.
Okay. Explain that, because and maybe if you could also explain the concept of dark matter for me, because I've read about it online, but I would expect that you probably know a lot more about it.
I mean, what you read is probably correct, but like, look, you could be a materialist who just says, yeah, we don't know, we don't fully know how gravity works. You don't have to believe in dark matter to be a materialist, right?
I see your point. So I guess maybe from to finally get to the idea of God from that beginning point of the conversation would be maybe that, for me at least personally, it seems like God would be, I would define God as a pattern or intelligent design or complex system that given our human faculties of sense and perception, we can't fully understand.
So God to you is just that which we don't understand? Is it that which we don't understand or that which we cannot even in principle understand?
I would say that which we don't understand, right? So like in my
eyes, God
like,
is always getting smaller.
Explain that for me. Flesh that out for me.
We're always understanding more and more. So the things that we don't understand is getting less and less.
Okay. I mean, I would maybe say that the faculty, like the idea of faith or belief in God is separate from, the belief that God is made manifest in physical reality. So it's like I don't necessarily see that by us understanding more of our physical reality, that means God is getting smaller. I would see it more as like understanding more about physical reality gives us better insight into the nature or the identity of God.
But didn't you say that God is those things that we don't understand?
I would say that no. So maybe let me like explain
go
that
ahead.
point a bit more. Maybe I guess a better way of putting that would be if like a very complex system. So if we take that God is the creator of some form of intelligent design that's made manifest through reality in the forms of laws of nature, physics, things that we can generally agree on through a scientific lens as truth or absolute reality or physical reality. God is made manifest through those systems, and aspects of physical reality which we don't understand or we see as probable or randomness or containing absolute randomness would be another way of saying that's an aspect of God that we can't comprehend, and the reason we and that would probably be I won't say the reason we can't comprehend it is because it's random, but it being random is an indicator that we can't fully comprehend the complexity of the design. Does that make sense?
I think so. So would you say that that's applicable to dark matter?
Yeah, I think so. And maybe quantum fluctuations would be similar. Like
Perhaps, and we can talk about that. But just to clarify, like dark matter is not like some random thing. We just don't know what it is. We just don't know what it is yet. I mean, wouldn't it seem kind of weird that like this creator being would create a universe that's so rigid in its laws and so evident in its laws that we, over the course of maybe 300 years, we've figured out like so much about how the universe works. But then he also put things in the universe that are just incomprehensible and cannot be understood using those same methods. It just seems kind of weird.
I don't know if it feels, I guess to me, I see it in a different view. I see it as like something that drives progression or meaning or advancement, right? Like, but without questions, doesn't it seem like maybe we wouldn't have as much purpose, meaning, or drive to uncover those questions? I don't know.
Oh yeah, sure. So you're not saying, are you saying that we will never understand dark matter? Because that's what I thought you were saying, but is...
No. I would say that and I guess this, I don't want to move the goalposts or be perceived as moving the goalposts, but I'm actually someone who, believes in science, but doesn't hold the scientific materialist worldview that, that is ultimate or supreme reality. I also have a belief in the tenets of different belief systems. So it's like, I'm not exclusive, right? Like that's a better way of saying
that's fine.
that. I'm not
you don't have to be.
But so I see the value in science and the progression of understanding and the use of ration and reason and logic to uncover truths about reality. But I guess my thought process is like, it seems like people who have, and maybe this is more true for people who engage in philosophy, because I feel like sometimes philosophy is a maybe more intellectual way of trying to understand the nature of reality than religion is. But I digress. Like the idea is, it seems like someone who has a purely deterministic worldview still has to accept things on a degree of faith because they have no evidence of the existence of those physical existence of that phenomena which they're talking about. They still have to accept that with faith, with the faculty of faith, the same way that someone who maybe has a religious belief system accepts things on faith as well. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, I know what you're saying. I just don't see how that follows, right? I mean, when you say faith, do you mean belief without evidence?
So it's like if you're supposing that.
Wait, hold on. By faith, do you mean belief without evidence?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess it just like dark matter is in my eyes something that stands out because it's like when you're taking up a worldview that's deterministic about physical reality and absolute reality, and you're saying, well, we have this cosmic web of different galactic structures and different star formations and dust and visible matter that's spread throughout the universe. And based on our theory of gravity and particle physics, like we know that all of this is true, and we know that it's expanding, yada yada. And so you're using that as a frame of reference to then go and make abstractions or talk about the dynamics of that system. Mm-hmm. And in order to make those abstractions and talk about different aspects of this system, you always rely on that frame of reference.
But that doesn't mean that there's no evidence. I mean, there is evidence of dark matter. It might not be be definitive evidence, but there's absolutely evidence of it, right?
What would be the evidence of it? Because my notion rests on the idea
three big pieces of evidence is galactic rotation curves, gravitational lensing of galaxy clusters, and the cosmic microwave background radiation.
But
all three of these. So what evidence is it is a piece of expected fact, or like a piece of expected information, or an expected fact about the world that is expected given a hypothesis, right? If you hypothesize the existence of dark matter, then you expect galaxies to weigh more than the matter that you can see in them would otherwise indicate. You would expect to see a certain cosmic microwave background spectrum. And so that is evidence. Now, it might not be like definitive evidence that's compelling to you, but it is evidence. It's not, this isn't faith. This isn't like, oh, this isn't just like a belief for no reason. Like there's evidence here.
But
and that
surely
evidence will be more or less compelling to other people.
But surely it's not the same form of evidence that you would see when, like, for instance, you have some traumatic physical injury to your leg. You go to the doctor, you do an x-ray, you see a physical breaking formation of a fracture formation in the bone of your leg. That's evidence that you broke your leg. And
that's
you can
very
say
compelling
before
evidence,
you went and saw the doctor that, hey, I'm hypothesizing that I broke my leg. And this evidence is that what definitive evidence is then?
Well,
the MRI that shows that you broke your leg?
So look, so the reason why that's evidence is because you have a hypothesis, hey, I broke my leg. And so if it's true that I broke my leg, then I would expect when I go to get an x-ray, I would see a broken bone in the x-ray machine. We can't we're using computers, we're using x-rays which we can't visibly see, but we would expect that there's some like fact about the world, namely when you get an x-ray you see a broken bone. So that is evidence. Now the reason why I would say that's more compelling evidence is because perhaps in some way it's more direct. As in like there's not some alternative explanation for why you could be seeing a broken bone on the x-ray that would also be consistent. Gotcha. There's no alternative explanation that's also consistent with a broken bone. So you would call that distinguishing evidence, or perhaps even definitive evidence. Distinguishing evidence being that evidence that can only be explained by one explanation and not by the others. Now, with regards to dark matter, there are alternative explanations. So the evidence that we have is not, I mean, again, this depends on who you ask. This is contentious, but it at least seems to be the case that there are people who think that the evidence we have for dark matter is not distinguishing, meaning that there are other alternative explanations that explain the same sets of evidence, same piece of evidence. But that doesn't mean the evidence isn't there.
Gotcha. Okay, I see it. I mean, I guess, but that kind of almost rings similar, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. Like, it almost rings similar to the idea of like different aspects of different religious belief systems, like have that same quality to them of like, well, if we hypothesize that there's a moral lawgiver, and if there was a moral lawgiver, then we'd expect to see a common moral law throughout all of humanity.
Right.
And it's like, well then, okay, we do see that there's a somewhat of a moral law across all humanity. So it's like, well then that would be evidence for the moral lawgiver.
Yeah, if that were true, you would see that. But we don't see that, right?
Okay.
I mean, like obviously, like there are societies where like incest is fine, and there are societies where incest is not fine, right? For example. So anyway, I mean, I know that was just an example. Yeah, cannibalism. That's another one. There are societies where cannibalism is okay.
But these would be the outliers, not the...
Yeah. But if you expected there to be a moral lawgiver, then you would expect this to be the case for every society, right? But anyway, I mean, you're right. So the point is you can provide evidence for some versions of gods. The question then is how strong is that evidence? Now, that's and so I would never say that somebody if somebody came up and said, hey, look, we have this fine-tuning thing, we have we have like these moral intuitions, we have XYZ various pieces of evidence. I wouldn't say that they have blind faith. I would say that those pieces of evidence just probably shouldn't be compelling to you for XYZ reasons. But that doesn't mean that they have like that doesn't mean that they have, I mean, they might say they have faith, but I don't, given the definition that you've given, I don't think that that's faith. They have some pieces of data that are consistent with the worldview that they have.
That's a good point. I like that. It's a good point. Well, I appreciate it, man. I did actually want to ask you another really interesting question, get your take on it. I think it's kind of related to the God discussion in a way, but it's more so related to consciousness, the problem of consciousness. I'm assuming you have a materialist view of the problem of consciousness.
I'm pretty agnostic about it, but yeah, generally. So I lean that way.
I guess my thoughts are with the innovation in artificial intelligence, like in some sense, I'm not sure how familiar you are with like neural networks and LLMs, but in some sense we're modeling, modern AI on the neural system, the neural circuit, the way the brain works. So I guess what comes to my mind is this idea of like, it seems like we're kind of running a massive research experiment in some sense on the hard problem of consciousness with AI, where if the hard problem of consciousness expects a complex enough system to create or be the cause of emergence of consciousness, if that's the materialist view and that's what materialists expect to happen, should we expect consciousness at some point to emerge from artificial intelligence?
Probably, yeah. That's really hard to say, but it's really hard. Here's the issue. It's really hard to tell when an AI becomes conscious, because right now, like people thought like, oh, the Turing test is like a good way to establish if something's conscious. Like, no, it's not, because LLMs can currently pass the Turing test, right?
Yeah, I agree with that.
So like there is a the trouble right now is not that, oh, we don't have consciousness, or oh, we need to make it more complex for it to see consciousness. We don't know how to figure out if something is conscious.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Like, we don't know how to accurately define that.
We just assume everybody else is, right? Because they look like us.
Exactly.
But
and they exhibit like characteristics that we would assume would mark that.
We don't have a way to actually tell. Anyway, I'm going to let you go because we're a bit off topic, but thank you for being here, John.
Man. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for doing what you do, man. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Bye.
All right, I'm going to bring up a guest from YouTube. KRF LOL, how's it going?
Going well. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Do you believe in God?
I do believe in God.
Okay, and which one?
Well, the Abrahamic God, and I found faith through Jesus Christ.
Okay, so would you say that you're Christian?
That's a fair enough assessment.
Okay, great. And what would you say is the most compelling argument you could give me in favor of that view?
Yeah, so I would argue that the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ is probably the most historically documented event, especially in the time frame. And there is not another narrative that makes sense other than his having been resurrected.
So can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by historically documented?
Yeah, so we can leave the New Testament aside for now. So, for example,
oh yeah, sure, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I'll go with secular, non-biblical accounts. So you have Cornelius Tacitus, who documented that he was executed by Pontius Pilatus, and that the event took place at around the time that Jesus would have been crucified.
Yep.
And that there was a movement that originated from his crucifixion. Yep. Then you have Pliny the Younger.
Well, wait a minute, hold on. Before we move on, with regards to Tacitus, does he say that he resurrected?
No.
Well, but so you said that the death and resurrection is the most well-attested claim.
Sure, and so the problem is that testimony of the resurrection become New Testament, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't be secular, non-biblical. So my argument would be that the New Testament is the historical documentation of the resurrection, but you can't, you can't combine the two and say that one's Christian and one's not Christian. Anyone who documented the resurrection is a Christian by default, right?
No, I don't think that's necessarily true. I mean, like, you know, I can imagine that you could have people of other faiths who think that Jesus was just like a prophet or something like that. They wouldn't have to be Christian.
Certainly,
Okay,
but
so-
if they
so-
believe,
So would you say that then there are no non-biblical accounts of the actual resurrection?
of the actual resurrection,
Yeah, because that's
No.
the thing in contention, right? Like, I'm willing to grant that Jesus lived and was crucified.
sure. And so moving, let's say moving into the New Testament, those who witnessed the crucifixion, again, they were accounted for in the New Testament.
Who?
I mean, the apostles to begin with, as well as,
But we don't have their writing,
non-apostles.
right?
Well, the New Testament, yes.
Well, okay, I guess we have some letters from Paul, right? But Paul didn't witness the resurrection, did he?
Yeah, so Paul, Matthew,
What did Matthew write?
let's see. Hang on. So we have, all right, this is a whole nother thing, but since we're in Matthew, you have the criterion of embarrassment is often used to measure the credibility of things, and
Hold
the
on.
fact that they used.
Let's not hold on.
yeah,
Let's not pivot, even if it's a small pivot. So, did Matthew
Sure.
write anything?
Yeah, let me find that set of notes.
Because Matthew, I mean, if you ask biblical scholars, they'll tell you that Matthew didn't write Matthew, like the gospel account. So, I don't know if we actually can, if we have any of his works that are like, agreed upon that he actually wrote it.
Okay, well, the book of Matthew has an account of the resurrection.
Right. But the claim is that Matthew, the disciple, the apostle, witnessed it, and we have his account. But we don't have his account. We don't have what he wrote.
Well, we have an account of the resurrection in Matthew.
We have a description of Matthew. Yeah, we have a description of the resurrection in the book of Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew. I agree with that, absolutely. But the question is do we have the accounts of any of the witnesses?
So, I mean, if you're arguing to the authenticity of who wrote Matthew, I mean, if the author of the account isn't Matthew himself, did he dictate it? It is Matthew's book, right? I mean, if we're going to say that, are you saying
I think that generally Matthew is like regarded as having been written anonymously? Like it wasn't some, it like wasn't like a dictation from like the actual disciple, that it was like, probably a compilation of church tradition or something like this.
Well, I mean, Matthew is definitely immediately post, I would say post-resurrection.
You think that it was written like immediately after Jesus was crucified?
Yeah, I mean, so most of the New Testament was written in the 3 to 5 years after the crucifixion.
You're talking about the Synoptic Gospels, right? Because those were not written that quickly afterwards, no.
A lot of them were. A lot of the accounts are from them, at least.
So you'll find what you will find is you'll find a lot of letters from Paul that are fairly recent or fairly soon after Jesus was crucified, like 5, 10, 20 years, something like this. But Matthew, Mark, and Luke were at earliest like 35 years after Jesus was crucified, and John was like potentially like 70 years after Jesus was crucified.
Yeah, and Paul's a great example because he would have no reason
to see Jesus resurrect.
Well, I mean, yes, he did.
No, he had a vision, right? He didn't see the risen Jesus.
Yeah, Jesus appeared to Paul on the road to Damascus. Now, whether it was
that's not an account of the resurrection.
Well, yes. I mean, it is an account. According to Paul, it's an account of the resurrection.
I mean, just think about it. Like an account of the resurrection is, hey, we saw Jesus walking around 3 days after he was crucified, right? Or hey, we met with Jesus after, like, you know, on the Sunday after he was crucified on the Friday, right? Like that's an account. Or hey, we were at the tomb and it was empty, and you know, then an angel came and said that, you know, Jesus is that way. Like those are accounts. A guy, you know, 50 miles away, 100 miles away, having a vision isn't an account of the resurrection. It's an account of a vision, sure, but it's not an account of the resurrection.
Presupposition would be to argue the authenticity of the New Testament, and I'll certainly give you that, but to say that it's not in there would be false.
Well, no, I mean, there are absolutely accounts of the resurrection in the Christian Bible, just not in Paul. Yeah. Paul doesn't claim to have been a witness of the resurrection.
In 1 Corinthians 15, I think he does.
I mean, he never met Jesus, right? So how could he have been a witness to the resurrection when that would have involved meeting Jesus?
Right, and so to say nobody witnessed him standing up and walking out of the tomb, right?
No, but but people meeting Jesus walking around like in Jerusalem, and then like, you know, having a full-on conversation. Like there's a story where like Jesus just shows up, like the physical Jesus just shows up in a room, right? And he's just like a normal dude, but after he had, like, that would be an account of like the risen Jesus. But a guy having a vision, not meeting like the risen Jesus, that's a different story. Now you could say that that's an account of like, that's a divine account. I don't think that anybody would ever say that Paul is a witness to the resurrection. That just seems very strange.
Okay, and that's fair. So can we agree that such accounts that you described exist in the New Testament? Because it would take me a while to find them. But we know that
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are filled with them.
Right, okay. So then we can establish that there are accounts of the resurrection. And that, you know, going back, I would say that the recording of that resurrection is contained in the New Testament. And so anyone who had a recording of that account, it was put into the New Testament by default, right? So there's no accounts of the resurrection of any credibility that exists outside of the New Testament.
Sure. The trouble is that we don't know who wrote these accounts, and we have good reason to think that they were written decades after Jesus was crucified, right?
Right, and so
it's not even clear if the people who wrote them were alive when Jesus was crucified.
So that approaches two things. You know, going back to the historical non-biblical accounts of it, we do have historical non-biblical accounts of the fact that there was a Jesus, he was crucified, and in the time frame immediately after crucifixion, it started an entire religious movement, right? That's established.
Well,
so whether or not,
well, sure, that's absolutely true. I mean, like it didn't grow as rapidly amongst the Jews as people think it did, but that's absolutely true. That there was a religious movement that started that grew to, you know, I don't know, several tens of thousands of people at least by the end of the first century over the next 60 years. And there are accounts of Jesus having been crucified. Sure.
Okay, and the fact that there are accounts of him at all is standout. There's royalty that we don't have nearly as good a record of. And so the fact that he exists, so we've established that he's a real person.
Which royalty do we not have as good an account of?
I mean, let's say even going back to royalty, the only historical account we have of the person who ordered the crucifixion of Jesus is the fact that he's the guy who ordered the crucifixion of Jesus, right?
Perhaps. I don't think he wasn't royalty though, was he? Wasn't he just like a governor?
He wasn't no, okay, royalty might have been misspoken, but he was a person of authority of the Roman Empire, and his only right, and his only notable thing is that he crucified Jesus, whereas Jesus was a tradesman. You know, there's no historical accounts of other.
Look, if the story that Jesus was a preacher for several years, amassed a decent-sized following, caused a bit of a ruckus, and then got executed for it, if that story is true, then you would expect people who were writing down the happenings of the day to record that. And if the guy who ordered that execution didn't do anything else of note, then why would anybody write it down? I mean, like the story of Jesus is at least notable. Like that's the kind of thing that I would expect to show up in like a local or state newspaper. Like local carpenter assembles cult, is executed by the state. Like Like, that's notable. It's not like world changing, but it's notable.
Great. Okay, so we could agree then that the life and crucifixion of Jesus probably happened, right?
Yeah. I don't know how
Okay,
much of the
so
details
now
we know about Jesus's life are true, because there's like conflicting accounts of like, you know, was the deal with like the three wise men, did that happen? Like that's only expressed in one of the biblical accounts. Then the question is like, where did Jesus go after he was born? Did he flee to Egypt? Like all of like there are some conflicting accounts, but like generally, like the general story, guy was a carpenter for most of his young adult life, and then he became a preacher, and then he assembled some people, and then he was executed. Like, yeah, that seems super plausible.
Okay. Now, so the point of contention then would be whether or not the resurrection was true,
And the
right?
miracles, whether the miracles happened too.
Sure,
Yeah,
and then again, you know, well, we can give a given that there may have been embellishment or something, right? But I came to argue that the resurrection of Jesus is the only plausible thing that accounts for, you know, the lack of there being a body in the tomb, while also people who, at risk of their own, at the very best case scenario, embarrassment, worst case scenario, execution, these are the only class of people who would have known that they were lying, and yet they chose to die for that lie, which doesn't happen. People die for their beliefs all the time. They don't die for their lives, right?
So question, when you say plausible, what's your, you know, criteria for an explanation to be plausible?
How do you explain the empty tomb and the accounting for all these people who, in some cases, or Paul being an example, didn't even like Jesus, thought he was,
I don't want a question. I just want like some sort of criteria we can use to establish if something's plausible or not.
Plausible, if no other explanation can account for a thing happening, then I would say that it's plausible, because we don't know what we don't know.
So you're saying, so it's kind of like what is it, the Sherlock Holmes criterion, that once you've accounted for the possible, the only what is the Sherlock Holmes thing?
It's like,
what is it? It's the statement, eliminate the impossible and what remains must be the truth, or something like this.
Yeah.
So if I could give you a possible explanation, would that mean that the resurrection account is no longer plausible?
If it fit the criteria of accounting for all the things, then I would certainly concede.
Yeah. It was here's a possible, not impossible. Here's a possible explanation. It was a conspiracy orchestrated by Pontius Pilate to quell the Jews' desire for rebellion. And this involved an imposter and various sleight of hand tricks.
So then he was an extremely bad strategist, because that failed miserably, and
no, it actually worked.
Christians.
It actually worked beautifully, because Christians famously don't fight back a lot. However, interestingly enough, I don't actually know if you knew this, Kerflal. This is an interesting feature, an interesting historical fact. After the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, the Jews were very, very upset, right? Reasonably so, right? And in fact, there was a series of wars that were started between the Roman Empire and the local Jews in the area. And it was a lot of time, but eventually the Jews did end up losing. And perhaps one of the reasons the Jews ended up losing this armed rebellion is because the Christians, who the Jews sought out, the Jews were like, hey, you guys are like, you're like a version of us, can come help us in the fight. The Christians refused to fight with the Jews. They refused to join forces. So, in fact, this is actually evidence in favor of the conspiracy hypothesis, because the goal was to pacify the Jews, and that worked. It made it so that the Jews were sufficiently weak that their rebellion failed.
Okay, so that is an interesting theory on the overarching thing. But if we can focus on the facts, the facts in question surrounding the resurrection itself. Okay, so you have, the empty tomb. Okay, so that's plausible. It's fair. It was said that the lie was spread that guards moved his body, right? So you're saying so that's accounted for by the plot, right? So guards
Yep.
were actually paid to hide the body, or it was an imposter. Which one is it? Well,
Yeah,
let's go into that.
so the guy that came back was an imposter. The real Jesus was never actually crucified, and he was just shipped off to Cyprus.
So who was crucified then?
A lookalike who was already in prison.
So there were two imposters,
lookalikes.
and
Yep.
Jesus got shipped off. So
Yep.
one lookalike got crucified.
Yep.
One lookalike pretended to be Jesus for 40 days, and then the real Jesus was
Yep.
secreted away.
Yep.
Okay, and so the lookalike that went out, and so you have Doubting Thomas, for example, they call him. You know, Thomas said, "I'll believe it when I can put my hands in the holes on his hands and torso." And then it goes on to say that he immediately became a believer. Was his experience manufactured?
Yeah, it was sleight of hand.
It was sleight of hand that this
trickery.
person was like, "I'll believe it when I physically touch the wounds."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so
It was a fake wound.
Okay, so they convinced 500 or so people of the imposter.
Sorry, who 500? Which 500?
Yeah, like
Are you talking about the 500
you know,
eyewitnesses? Yeah, I mean, like most of them didn't know him personally. Most of them wouldn't have recognized him from a football field away. Yeah, of course they'd be fooled by the imposter.
So the apostles and including people like Paul who didn't have any incentive to believe in the resurrection. In fact, none of them had any reason to believe in the resurrection because the Jewish resurrection narrative was that everyone would come back at the same time. They didn't have a belief that someone would be resurrected.
Yeah, that's why they had to manufacture. That's why they had to go through so much effort, right? That's why they had to actually put together sleight of hand tricks to trick people into thinking that actually miracles did happen and trick people into thinking that this guy actually did resurrect. Otherwise, I mean, if the local people at the time were super willing to believe it already, they wouldn't have needed to go through so much effort. Okay, so your narrative is that there was a resurrection, but that it was manufactured. It was a manufactured. The narrative is that nobody resurrected, just that they faked the resurrection. No. So there was a perceived resurrection. Everyone who said that they saw a resurrection truly believed it, but that it was manufactured. Yep. Okay, what can I research to substantiate that manufactured claim of a resurrection? What do you mean to research? What do you need to research? I just gave you a plausible explanation, didn't I? Well, yeah, I mean, the plausibility includes the fact that I can, verify. No, Kerflow, that's not what you call plausible. Sorry, let me rephrase. I shouldn't say, Kerflow, I shouldn't say it's a plausible explanation. I should say it's a possible explanation. It's not impossible, right? These kinds of things do happen. Conspiracies do happen. Sleight of hand is real. People are tricked by magic tricks all the time. People are tricked. People mistake imposters for people all the time. This is possible, right? Okay, so I would say that it's less possible. Well, wait a minute. But your claim for plausibility of the resurrection was that once you've eliminated all of the impossible, once you've ruled out all of the other options once you've ruled them out as impossible, well, here's an option that you haven't ruled out. It's not impossible. My plausibility. No, you're right. My criteria for plausibility was insufficient because I mean. So what criteria would you need? What's possible? I mean, by that argument, you could have just told me the Bible was made up, right? I mean, that's possible. It's possible all this shit is made up. That's certainly possible. Yeah. Okay. Fair. So what's your plausibility criterion? Yeah, so plausibility, I mean, there would have to be some burden of proof into at least the burden of proof given to Jesus's life and death at the very least, that the events actually happened or that he even had a thought to do that. I mean, in your example, I know that was just an example, but certainly there would have to be at least as much supporting evidence as the resurrection itself. But here's the thing, there is. Every single fact that you claim supports the resurrection also supports the conspiracy. I would agree with you up to the point where they convinced that many people of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. That just means that they did a good job. Yeah, I mean, that's. In fact, I actually gave you an additional piece of evidence that your account cannot account for. The resurrection
but
can't account for the
again,
fact that the early Christians wouldn't fight alongside the Jews.
I don't know enough about that to comment, and it's not really salient to the facts of the resurrection.
But it is salient as that's an expectation of a successful conspiracy.
Well, and even the criteria of it being successful is not necessary. I mean, it could have just been a bad idea. I mean, I would certainly argue that the Christian faith, and there is historical accounts of that, became a thorn in Rome's side for good reason. So, I mean, it could have been a bad idea, whether or not it happened.
In some sense, there would have been unintended consequences that they didn't account for if the conspiracy was true. However, the original goal of the conspiracy, again, if it happened, was achieved, right? The rebellious Jews failed in their rebellion.
Right, and so
and then got driven out as a result. So that would be.
And so, and so you're saying that evidence of the resurrection is evidence of this plot, but there is no evidence of the plot beyond the resurrection, and so there's two accounts that both expect the same facts on the ground, right? There's not a fact on the ground that the resurrection account can account for, or that the resurrection theory can account for, that the conspiracy theory cannot account for. Well, is there any documentation of any similar conspiracy having happened? I mean, anything just...
Yeah, are you asking for proof that conspiracies have happened?
No, a conspiracy where, hey, we have this guy. I know that their religion doesn't even believe in resurrection before the end of time. Let's do a resurrection conspiracy. I mean, was that just a spark of creativity? Are you saying?
Yeah, brilliantly creative. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't account that. I don't see that as being any more plausible than having been resurrection.
KRF lol. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
So I think that we could reasonably say that the conspiracy, it's possible, but maybe it seems super unlikely. But it seems even more unlikely to me? Literally magic. Literally a guy actually rising from the dead. That seems more unlikely than just a brilliant conspiracy theory, or a brilliant conspiracy that was successfully carried out.
Yeah, certainly, and being, you can tie any narrative into, the accounts of it, and say it's more plausible to me because it obeys the laws of physics that I understand, which is why I didn't want to get into the laws of physics and stuff, because, we are making magic into textbooks every day, and so why is that tiny little bit of magic, the Big Bang is the one miracle that all atheists agree on, right?
I wouldn't say that's a miracle. Why would you say that's a miracle?
I
get that that's a meme, but it's not a very true meme.
Yeah. Well, there's no way to support the Big Bang just as much as creation, right?
There's no way to support the Big Bang? Do you really believe that? You don't think that there's evidence for the Big Bang?
All right. What happened before the Big Bang, right? And this is why I didn't want to get into it, because no one... Well, before the Big Bang?
Yeah.
Inflation.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the universe is not expanding in a way explainable by the Big Bang.
What's the evidence?
Right? So
what's the evidence that the universe is not explainable in a way, or is not expanding in a way explainable by the Big Bang?
Yeah, so older parts of the universe aren't redshifting in the way that you'd expect to.
Which parts of the universe aren't doing that?
The older parts of the universe.
Older parts are not redshifting. Sorry, I thought you said other parts of the universe. Which older parts of the universe are not redshifted in the way that's expected? Are you talking about large galaxies that are older than we thought?
No, with modern sensors, and I'm getting to the edge of my knowledge on this, but we've deployed, I think, we recently deployed a new sensor array, or quote unquote telescope, and it's able to see further. And so
why'd you say quote unquote telescope?
But because it's an array of sensors that
No, it's a telescope. It has
telescopes.
mirrors and like electromagnetic, like it's like it uses like a CMOS chip, like a camera.
Well, a CMOS chip is a sensor.
Okay, but then like all telescopes are like, a telescope is just this type of optics used for magnifying faraway things.
Right, and then when you put a CMOS on it, it becomes a sensor. It's semantics. The telescope is the optics.
Sorry, it just made me think that you're a flat earther, which I hope you're not.
No, no, I'm not. That'd be weird to talk about how old the universe is and say
Yeah,
that
okay.
it's flat in the same.
So what do you say? So okay. So we're talking about the James Webb, the JWST, and you're saying that what about it is something is redshifting differently than we would expect?
It's not redshifting. You know, the Doppler effect.
Yeah, so but which thing?
Older,
Can you hear me?
yeah, I'm looking it up.
Sorry, I didn't know. Yeah, no, you're good. Take your time.
Man, this would take me a while to find. I'm not saying it is point of fact, really, and so I didn't want to get into the nuts and bolts of how the universe works, because my argument would be that the universe is a consequence of creation anyway, so we can solve all the problems of the universe, and that still doesn't solve for God, right? So that's my
sure.
point.
But like saying that the Big Bang didn't happen because there's no, I mean, like there's like so much evidence for it. And I don't see why you have to reject the Big Bang, even if you believe in God. So,
and I don't have to. That's my point. Okay. And so,
but you also
we're getting into
the scientific view is not that it's a miracle, right?
Okay. Well, what I was trying to say is that we don't have a firm grasp on how the world and the universe behave in the first place. So to say
there's
that
a lot of things we don't understand.
Resurrection is magic is as fair to say that anything around us is magic. Now,
well, but hold on, there's an issue here. The issue is that you are, under your worldview, you are obliged to believe that the resurrection was actually a miracle and not just some natural phenomenon that we don't understand, right?
I think the two are the same, is what I'm saying.
So when I say actually a miracle, I mean like literally intervention by God and not just some natural process that could have happened on its own.
Right, and so this is the disconnect, which is why I don't want to get into the mechanics of the universe, is that the two are the same, right?
You would say that
I think the universe is a miracle. I think quantum computing is a miracle. It is direct intervention by God, right?
Wait, you think that God is directly intervening to make every law of physics continue operating, and like, you know, that like he didn't just set stuff in motion and let it go, but like you think that when I drop a pen and it hits the ground, you think that it's not because of gravity? Oh, he left. Bummer. Oh, he's back. I think this is him. Ah, he's back. Okay. Welcome back. You good?
Hey, sorry, something happened.
Yeah, no, you're fine. I mean, like, is it your view that when I drop a pen, it's not because of gravity, but because of God?
Yes. And so God created gravity, right? So the extent of creation, and it's why a lot of you know, like Einstein was highly religious, you know.
No, he wasn't. Hold on, don't do that. No, he wasn't.
Yeah.
He was a non-religious person at the core. Now, he may have been an agnostic about, you know, like the existence of like Spinoza's God, which is kind of like pantheism. But he did not believe in a personal God in any sense of the word.
Okay. Well, there are a lot of people who are close to science that aren't religious. Okay.
Sure.
Or not even religious.
Cite Einstein because it's just factually untrue.
Yeah. Well, and you know, people make the same argument about Isaac Newton. You know, when
Isaac Newton was definitely a believer.
Right. But the same parallels are drawn. You know, when Isaac Newton couldn't solve for certain planetary calculus, he just said God does it. You know, and that's the reason our solar system hasn't fallen apart. Anyway, and that's the point. The point being is that to say that this is gravity, not God, is to me a false equivalency as a believer in God. God is gravity, just as he's all the other strong and weak forces and everything else.
So do you think that God is the universe?
No, in the same way that you are not a hair on your head, right?
Okay, so you're saying that the universe is part of God.
Yes.
Do you believe that God has parts?
I can only understand parts in my barely four-dimensional understanding of the universe. So in the way that I understand it, yes, I believe there are parts, but we haven't even figured out this part, so I'm not going to say that I understand any more beyond that.
Just keep in mind that that's a really risky and potentially heretical view to think that God has parts, because if you believe that, then you are very, very close to thinking that God is not necessary.
And maybe that's semantics, and that's why I barely conceded to being Christian, even though I obviously firmly believe in the resurrection of Jesus. So if someone finds me a heretical, that's fine. I believe in God, and I found my belief in that in the resurrection.
And also, just to be clear, like, then it's your view that, and would you say that God is all good?
No.
No, you would not say that God is all good.
No, but I believe that all good is God.
What I meant is one of the qualities of God being all good.
No.
So God can do bad things.
Well, in so much of our understanding of good and bad, yeah.
So God can do bad things?
I mean, yeah, as we understand them, yes. I mean, certainly, if God created the universe, He created cancer. You know, He created the Holocaust. Sure. You know, so yeah. I mean, you can't say God created everything except those bad things over there that I don't like.
Okay, just checking. And is it your view that we have free will separate from God's?
Yes.
But God is everything in the universe, including our free will?
Yeah, and that's...
So God is our free will?
Well, yeah. Well, and so, you know, again, this is going into barely understanding space-time. You know, if we were to take a step out and view the fourth dimension as someone who can, then you would say that there is a straight line between your birth and your death, right? That doesn't mean that your free will doesn't dictate how that line is drawn. So yeah, there's a blending between determinism and free will there that I believe in.
By free will, do you mean that all else being equal, you could have done something different?
Yes, or to put it another way, that we have a world model that makes us think that we could have.
Oh, I agree with that. That absolutely we think that we could have done different, but that doesn't mean that we could. Okay, that's fine. So sorry, we kind of got off on a tangent. So what I said is that, you know, the resurrection is literally magic, and you said, okay, well, I correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like your view is basically that all things that happen naturally are as likely as the resurrection.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or that the resurrection is as likely as anything else that happens.
Why hasn't it ever happened again?
Yeah,
if it's just like a natural thing.
Yeah, and so in the description of Jesus as a savior and as a Messiah, and there's, you know, people who worship him as God. I read it differently in that Jesus was sent to put into documents that could be looked up 2,000 years in the future of something miraculous happening, proof that there is a God. Because Jesus even himself said, don't worship me, worship the Father. So that's the God that I'm talking about. God sent Jesus here to be like, look, y'all are fucking up. You're not understanding the message. Here is another miracle right in front of you that will be written about for 2,000 years.
But there are no miracles in your view. They're just all natural things that happen because of natural laws, basically?
No, they are miracles.
Gravity?
Yeah, I would certainly say gravity is a miracle by itself, and that we take for granted. I don't understand the question or the point.
Okay, so I guess my question is if we reproduced exactly the scenario of Jesus again, down to the molecule, we reproduced exactly Jesus, reproduced exactly the Roman cross and the crucifixion and the exact same. We did everything the exact same way again. Would he resurrect again? you know, in the year 2025?
Well, I mean, by making it the year 2025, we've already thrown a wrench in that exactly thing.
Well, I mean, like if we had like a
and
controlled
so,
environment where we could like perfectly replicate
yeah,
it.
Yeah, all right. I see what you're saying. No, okay, and this is, you know, being, you know, the universe being a hair on God's head. Yes, there was intervention by God to resurrect them, and that's the point, right?
So that's what I meant by miracle. So like,
Yeah.
so maybe under your worldview, the right way to distinguish between these is there are kind of things that happen automatically, like your hair automatically grows, and then there's the kind of things that don't happen automatically, like plucking a hair.
Sure.
And so I would say that like gravity is more like the hair growing automatically kind of thing, and plucking a hair would be like the divine intervention miracle kind of thing.
Sure.
So would that be an accurate description?
Yes, and in that description, then the resurrection was a miracle, and it was intended to be one. Yeah.
But in that regard, then we have all of the reasons to think that things that don't require miracles in that sense, things that are more akin to the hair growing, are overwhelmingly more likely than things that are miraculous, that are more akin to the hair being
certainly.
plucked.
Yeah, the overwhelming. I mean, that depends. Like, by what metric are we measuring things? I mean, the universe
Just any
goes by,
metric.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, certainly. Like, I mean, trillions upon trillions. I mean, yeah, every
Most
atom
of the universe at
currently
most moments in time, there are
behaving
no miracles.
Oh, right.
So it just seems like any explanation that can account for the claims of resurrection that doesn't rely on miracles, that doesn't rely on these kinds of miracles, divine intervention, if you will, are far more likely a priori than any explanation that requires one of these.
Yeah, well, and again, that depends on how you define statistics, because if any miracle happened, then any miracle is likely to happen, right? I mean,
no, it doesn't mean that it's likely. It just means that it's possible, right?
Okay, so sure, possible.
But we're talking about likelihood here. We have two explanations which account for the same pieces of data. The question is which is more likely, given the explanations that we have? On the one hand, you have something that requires divine intervention, which we've already established is wildly unlikely, perhaps not impossible, but wildly unlikely.
No. See, that's where I draw the line. Wildly unlikely. I mean, you could throw probability at any problem. You know, like what's the probability of getting the same, you know, deck of cards,
yes,
right? It's extremely unlikely, but you can still play poker with them, right? So, I mean, I don't like your application of statistics here, and hopefully I made a case for why.
It just sounds like you're saying that you don't like using probability or using, you know, what we're really doing here is Bayesian reasoning. You just don't like using this kind of probabilistic reasoning to determine which explanation is more likely. No,
I'm saying that, you know, life tends to happen in the tail, you know, in the outliers. Yeah.
So you're saying, you know, it might be, you're right. It might be way less likely that Jesus actually resurrected, but that means that you should believe it because of that?
No, I'm saying that it's very easy to manufacture a narrative based on the resurrection narrative that seems more plausible to us. But
right, and that's the question. What is more plausible? What is more plausible given the information we have?
Yeah, in retrospect, right? But if we give the credence to these as written when they were written, then it would seem that if there was a hint that there could have been some kind of conspiracy that would have been landed on as far more likely, and we wouldn't be having this conversation now. Like, these are not stupid people, right?
Who are, if they didn't know, if this conspiracy was successful, why would we expect them to have known about it?
If the resurrection narrative existed before Jesus, then I would.
Who said it did?
The resurrection narrative.
Why does it need to have? Also, by the way, I think Nero. I think there was a story about Nero having resurrected, and so much so that like thousands of people followed the there was a narrative about this, and there was an imposter, and like so much so that like thousands of people followed the imposter to their deaths.
I don't know.
In fact, there were 3 of these. They were called
Nero.
They were called Nero, or they were called pseudo Neros or Nero imposters. Right. This happened 3 times. one of which ended up in an armed rebellion. A bunch of the followers of the pseudo Nero ended up, I guess, marching on Rome, and then they were all killed, of course, because of course they were.
This is actually a resurrection narrative that was post crucifixion. So they got the idea from the crucifixion, right?
So I mean, do you want me to find you accounts of people coming back from the dead from before then?
I'm
sure that they exist, right?
But not in the Judeo-mythology that was targeted, right? That wouldn't have been the accepted narrative by these people who accepted it.
That's not relevant. The relevant point is that people had thought of resurrection beforehand.
Right, but the fact that a resurrection was more likely to these people who firmly did not believe in resurrection. Nobody said that it was more likely to them.
Nobody said it was more likely to them. That's why they had to go through so much effort to. That's why the conspiracy had to go through so much effort to convince them, with like magic tricks and stuff like that, and imposters. Look, so we're circling again, but the point is that we have two competing accounts, one of which requires divine intervention, and the other doesn't. And all else being equal, the one that doesn't require divine intervention is just more likely.
Yeah, and I guess my argument from the start has been the fact that we are speaking of it as a resurrection, and the book that we read it out of, the Bible, is proof of the validity, which may be a bridge too far. However, my argument is that the New Testament is an accounting of the resurrection of Jesus.
Or it's an accounting of the conspiracy.
Sure. Let's say it was a conspiracy. It was a convincing enough conspiracy to send the message of the Abrahamic God through the ages to this day. So even in best case scenario, it was one of the hairs plucked by God to continue the Bible on through the next several centuries.
But the thing is if the conspiracy theory is correct, then you don't need to pluck any hairs.
No. Okay, so what I'm saying is that if we accept the conspiracy as truth, which I'm not, everything else in the Bible is there. Another historical account, early Christians, treating Christ as someone who resurrected and being of high moral character, right? If this conspiracy
that would be accounted for by telling the imposter to be a good person.
Hear me out, please. If in fact it was a conspiracy, it was recorded in such a way on top of the Old Testament, which outlines the Abrahamic God's rules, right? If it was in fact such a convincing narrative that it got all these people to believe in God, because Jesus is not the God I'm arguing for. It is in fact his, Father, as he says, Yahweh Elohim. If it was such a convincing narrative that it got all these people to believe in God, the God of Jesus, then I would say that it achieved the same goal at the end of the day.
Right, but the argument that you were presenting for God's existence was that there's no other plausible explanation for Jesus' resurrection. But if I've offered a plausible explanation, then we don't even have reason to think that the God exists. At least that particular argument doesn't work anymore.
Well, no, I was conceding that if we're going back and creating narratives around the resurrection narrative, which I believe that at the time of written seemed way more plausible than conspiracies, because conspiracies happen all the time and these are not stupid people. But if they did in fact create such a convincing narrative that it convinced people for thousands of years that Jesus was resurrected, then I would still concede that's part of God's plan that we don't understand. However, I don't fully concede that the resurrection narrative isn't true. I'm just saying that if it was, it still put a lot of people in front of God.
So just to be clear, you're saying that if it was a giant conspiracy, that would still be proof of God?
Yeah.
But that's just moving the goalpost from the original argument. The original argument was that there's no other plausible explanation. And I've shown another plausible explanation. You're just saying, oh, well, but that also is proof of God. It just changes the argument.
No. That's unfair. I'm in fact arguing that it would be ridiculous for so many people to have accepted that argument as true. But you have zero evidence for your argument. I'm saying that the evidence is the resurrection myth.
All the evidence that you've offered is evidence for my conspiracy.
Yeah, and that's the problem. And so there's no going beyond that. If you're saying that all my evidence is evidence for yours, I mean, we could make up narratives all day long on that.
Yes,
right?
except mine is a priori more plausible because it doesn't require divine intervention. Everything is following the natural laws of the universe.
That's fair. And so mine would take a concession that we don't understand how the resurrection happened.
Well, under your view, it's divine intervention, right? It's not something that can be explained using natural law.
Right. And so that's the first part. And the second part was that it was enduring enough for, someone like me to have read the Bible in the first place, of which Jesus
to be clear, that's not whether or not it was a conspiracy, all you needed was a critical mass of people so that Constantine would hear about it in 325 AD. And once Constantine heard about it, it had nothing to do with anything. It was because Constantine was ruler of Rome, and the Roman Empire was the dominant force in the West, and he basically forced the entire empire to convert. And then, as a result, Europe became Christian, and because Europe, well, for a bunch of historical coincidences, basically, Europe was the dominant world power 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago even, or maybe 500 years ago. During the time of colonialism, it spread to the rest of the world. That has nothing to do with whether or not Jesus resurrected. That was political, right?
Right. Well, and so it does. And so what I'm saying, and what you're saying, is that it doesn't matter whose version of magic it is. The resurrection of Jesus formed the movement of Christianity that brought a lot of people to the faith. Right. And so that's the concession I'm making.
My theory doesn't require magic.
Well, it does. By your definition, they use magic tricks, right? It's just a different kind of magic,
okay.
right? We don't know what kind of magic tricks. You and I both know that magic tricks
are not actually magic, right?
Yeah, but what you're saying is we don't know what they did or how they did it, but it was convincing enough to all these people, and thus,
right.
So you're saying, well, it doesn't disobey the laws of physics, therefore it's possible. And I'm saying that the resurrection doesn't disobey the laws of physics.
Well, it does disobey all the laws of physics as we know them.
Well, no, it doesn't. I mean, people come back from the dead every day, right?
Nobody comes back from the dead in that way. No.
Not in that. So we don't know how it happened, but that it happened, right? And I think
go find me another example of somebody coming back from actually coming back from brain death after 3 days.
You will find none. Find examples.
You will find none.
Anyway, it's more likely.
I need to go eat lunch. I feel like we're going in circles, but at least consider it. At least consider the idea, which is more plausible. Okay, is that fair?
Sure, and I think that's the bridge. Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate your time.
Thanks for being here, man. All right, y'all. I'm gonna read super chats and then I'm gonna end the live because I'm 30 minutes over and I'm hungry. But we have some super chats to read. So from Stinky Ethian, with the $5. Thank you, Stinky Ethian. Didn't a guy pretending to be Nero resurrected convince entire army? Yes, that's exactly what I was referring to. Although I guess that was after Jesus, so that's a fair point. From Ow Fox with the 50 something, I don't know what currency that is. One true church is the Church of Roxy. And with another 50 something, we get all hail Satan. Absolutely true. From Artie Bacon with the $5, just send in $5, thank you. And then from Ow Fox again with 125 currency of some kind. God is a man-made construct to instill fear and order. To an extent, I think that you're right. I think that there's probably, I don't think it's malicious perhaps, but I think that there have been malicious people who have taken advantage of it. Anyway, I am going to end the live here. I know that there's a lot of people waiting on YouTube and on TikTok. So guys, thank you for waiting and being patient. Sorry I couldn't get to you today. In the meantime, I will be live again sometime in the future. I don't know if I'll be live tomorrow. My wife might need my attention tomorrow morning. But if you want to get notified when I'm live, when I'm posting videos, make sure to join the Discord server. There's a link in the description of the YouTube video that you're currently watching this on, if you're watching on YouTube. If you're watching on TikTok, go to my profile, click on the link tree. There's a link down there in the profile to my Discord server. The only thing that you have to do with that link is you have to copy the link and paste it into a browser. If you just click the link, for some reason, it doesn't work. Anyway, that's all I have for you guys today. I'll see you, if not tomorrow, then the next day, or then the next time.